A dispute between two households in a gated community in North Las Vegas reached a breaking point in January 2024 when a 46-year-old local pastor named Nick Davey was gunned down in cold blood outside his townhouse. The horrific slaying began as a verbal confrontation between Davey and his neighbor, 36-year-old Joe Jr., before escalating into deadly violence. Fellow pastor Ty Neal later told Fox 5 that Jr. had been terrorizing Davey's family for weeks leading up to the fateful encounter. According to a wrongful death lawsuit filed by Davey's wife, the problems between the neighbors began after Davey complained about Jr. to their homeowners association. Jr. allegedly showed a pattern of escalating behavior after that. Davey's family was leaving their home for an evening out when Jr. allegedly drove up and confronted them. One of the pastor's children began recording the altercation as tensions between the parties intensified. In the video, Davey could be seen stepping toward Jr.'s car while asking what her problem was. Both he and his wife, Sarah Davey, were struck by gunfire during the disagreement as their horrified children watched from inside the family's vehicle. Nick died from his injuries, while Sarah survived. Jr. was arrested at the scene of the shooting and remains behind bars at the Clark County Jail amid her ongoing case. She pleaded not guilty to charges of open murder with a deadly weapon, attempted murder, battery, child abuse and neglect, and discharging a gun or weapon where a person might be endangered. Prosecutors have decided not to seek the death penalty, but the accused killer could face life without parole if convicted as charged. Number 13. Paul Edmonds. In September of 2020, a 78-year-old coin collector named Paul Edmonds was fatally shot in the parking lot of a Hardee's restaurant in Indianapolis while trying to sell coins to a young woman who was later identified as 24-year-old Kayla Jade Blankenship. Surveillance footage from a nearby liquor store appeared to show Blankenship exiting an SUV and getting into Edmonds' car outside a Hardee's restaurant. Just moments later, the car charged forward and the suspect jumped out of the vehicle as it was still moving. Blankenship got back into the SUV and fled the scene. In the meantime, Edmonds entered the Hardee's restaurant and told employees to dial 911 and that he'd been shot. He was still alive when officers arrived at the scene, and he told them that the woman who shot him didn't even manage to get away with any of his money. Edmonds died later on at the hospital. Inside the victim's vehicle, the police found a knife, a zip tie, and a spent bullet cartridge. There was also a cell phone containing correspondence, which helped them identify Blankenship as the suspected shooter. Blankenship and her boyfriend were arrested following the discovery of her car behind a local hotel. While searching the young woman's purse, officers found a gun matching the description of the suspected murder weapon. Authorities charged Blankenship with murder and robbery. In May of 2022, she struck a deal with prosecutors and pleaded guilty to murder in exchange for a 45-year prison sentence, and the rest of the charges being dropped. Number 12. Mystery man killed by mystery murderers. In June of 2021, a Houston man was fatally gunned down outside a gas station by a pair of unknown suspects. The victim, whose identity was withheld by the media, was killed at around 8:30 p.m. while he was sitting in his car. Surveillance footage showed the suspects exiting a white four-door Dodge pickup truck shortly after it pulled into the parking lot. They approached the victim and opened fire, shooting him multiple times and causing him to fall out of his vehicle and onto the ground. Before fleeing the scene with the driver of the pickup truck, one of the suspects robbed the victim's person while the other ransacked his vehicle. The victim died from his injuries, and police released the security video to the public in hopes that someone would come forward with information leading to the suspect's identity. Unfortunately, the killers remain at large. Number 11. K'Juan Taylor. K'Juan Taylor was just steps from her Highland Park, Michigan home when she was mercilessly gunned down in broad daylight in August of 2022. Nearby surveillance cameras captured the moment an armed man exited a blue SUV and chased Taylor between houses as she screamed in sheer terror. Based on the assassin's actions in the video, investigators believe that Taylor's murder was targeted and that the killer knew who he was going after. A source familiar with the case told Fox 2 Detroit that Taylor was near her home and walking her usual route when the shooting occurred. The young woman's senseless death was no doubt tragic. Taylor's friends told reporters that they didn't understand who might want her dead or why, given her kind nature. Thankfully, nobody else was hurt, although an elderly woman's window was shot out. The killer's identity and motive were a mystery to detectives from the beginning. Unfortunately, it appears as though this is still the case, despite law enforcement's appeals to the public for information that might help lead to the identification and arrest of a suspect. Updates on the case went eerily silent shortly after news of the murder broke, leaving the outcome of the case unclear. Number 10. Paul Robinson. On Memorial Day weekend in late May of 2022, a man later identified as 34-year-old Lamont Smallwood allegedly murdered 26-year-old Paul Robinson in an apartment complex parking lot in Norfolk, Virginia. Security footage appeared to show Smallwood approaching Robinson and knocking him to the ground. The suspect proceeded to beat the victim, stripping him down to his underwear, then fatally shot him as he lay helpless on the pavement. According to a press release, Smallwood and Robinson got into a verbal altercation in front of multiple witnesses. When the disagreement turned physical, Smallwood allegedly pulled his own gun and took Robinson's gun away from him, leaving him completely defenseless. After shooting Robinson in the neck and shoulder, Smallwood fled the scene in a vehicle. Prosecutors credited the high quality of the surveillance video and the cooperation of a crucial witness with helping them identify the perpetrator and secure a conviction. Smallwood was found guilty of second-degree murder and the use of a firearm in the commission of a murder. He received sentences totaling nearly 26 years in prison. The term will run consecutive to a 24-year sentence that Smallwood was already serving at the time for a probation violation, which means that he'll spend around 49 years in prison before he becomes eligible for release. It could also very well mean that he ends up spending the rest of his life behind bars. Number 9. Landy Paraga Goiburo. On what began as an ordinary day in April of 2024, former Miss Ecuador contestant Landy Paraga Goiburo was fatally gunned down in broad daylight in the city of Quevedo. Surveillance footage showed the 23-year-old chatting with someone inside a restaurant when she noticed a pair of masked gunmen sneaking past the door. Before she could run or hide, one of the assailants charged at her and fired his gun repeatedly, striking both Paraga and the man she was speaking with. The second gunman could be seen standing guard at the restaurant's entrance. After the shooting, both suspects fled the scene as Paraga bled to death on the floor. At the time, the ex-beauty queen was visiting the city to attend a wedding. Her murder came just months after her alleged ties to an Ecuadorian crime boss were exposed to the public via a discussion between the drug lord Leandro Norero and his accountant Elive Angulo. During a criminal trial against Angulo, prosecutors revealed that Norero, who was married, had begged him to help conceal his relationship with the beauty queen. In a message, Norero allegedly wrote, "If my wife comes across anything about her, I'm screwed. My world will come crashing down." Parada's finances fell under legal scrutiny at one point, but she was never charged with any crimes prior to her death, and she never publicly admitted to being associated with the gangster. The murderers reportedly tracked her down through her location on social media. According to the most recent available updates, the case remains under investigation and the killers are still at large. Number 8. Roger Fortson. In May of 2024, a sheriff's deputy in Okaloosa County, Florida, fired 6 shots at 23-year-old U.S. Air Force senior airman Roger Fortson in the doorway of his apartment. Fortson died from his injuries, and society is now rightfully demanding an explanation of why yet another black man has died at the hands of law enforcement. According to law enforcement, the deputy visited Fortson's residence in response to a disturbance complaint. At the time, Fortson was home alone with his small dog while FaceTiming with his girlfriend. Police body cam footage reportedly shows the deputy knocking on the front door and announcing himself as a member of law enforcement. Fortson answered the door with a gun in his hand, which was pointed at the ground, and the deputy immediately opened fire on the young man, who died from his injuries at a nearby hospital. Okaloosa Sheriff Eric Aden, claimed that the deputy acted in self-defense. According to news reports, however, the deputy pulled the trigger just seconds after Fortson opened his front door. Renowned civil rights attorney Ben Crump, who's representing Fortson's family, said that Fortson didn't hear the deputy announce himself before he answered the door, and because he didn't know he was being visited by law enforcement, he grabbed his gun for his own protection. There has also been talk about the possibility that the deputy was at the wrong apartment, since the complaint he was responding to was about a dispute between a man and a woman, and Fortson was home alone at the time. An investigation by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement is ongoing, and the state attorney's office will determine whether or not to pursue criminal charges. For now, the deputy involved remains on paid administrative leave while Fortson's loved ones try to wrap their minds around his unexpected and seemingly avoidable death. Number 7. Tushar Atra. 50-year-old Tushar Atra was a tech entrepreneur turned marijuana executive who lived in a multi-million-dollar beachside home in Santa Cruz, California. From the outside looking in, his life represented the epitome of the American dream, but things aren't always as they seem. And Atra's dream life was abruptly cut short one morning in October 2019 when he was kidnapped from his home and murdered in the nearby Santa Cruz mountains. Footage from a neighbor's surveillance camera showed a trio of mysterious men walking toward Atra's residence shortly before 3 o'clock in the morning. Several of Atra's living employees overheard the suspects entering the home and talking amongst themselves about a safe. They could also hear Atra's voice as the men took him captive, although it's unclear whether the staff members could hear exactly what Atra was saying. According to investigators, the intruders were most likely referring to a safe in Atra's bedroom, which reportedly contained around $80,000 in cash, but they left the property without ever opening it, taking Atra with them, and the employees called 911. Responding officers found no signs of forced entry, and the home did not appear to be ransacked, despite the fact that Atra had been taken against his will. A BMW belonging to Atra's girlfriend had vanished from the scene, even though she was out of town at the time and there was blood in the street. Additional security footage showed Atra trying to run away from his home with his hands bound behind his back while the suspects chased and tackled him. At least one of the men could be seen carrying an assault rifle as the men forced Atra into the BMW and drove away. Later that day, police found the car abandoned near Atra's cannabis farm in the Santa Cruz Mountains. There was blood on both the interior and exterior of the vehicle. A few dozen feet away, Atra's murdered body lay face down and handcuffed behind his back with zip ties. He had been stabbed multiple times and shot at least once. Months turned to years as time passed without any major leads. Finally, in 2023, authorities charged 4 suspects in connection with the case: Stephen Lindsay, Joshua Camps, Curtis Charters, and Caleb Charters. Stephen Lindsay and Caleb Charters are allegedly disgruntled former employees of Atra's who only worked for him for a short period and who believed Atra owed them money. Prosecutors have also speculated that the ex-workers felt emasculated after being ordered to do push-ups in front of other employees. All 4 defendants have pleaded not guilty to murder, kidnapping, and robbery. According to the most recent available updates, the suspects were slated to go to trial in March of 2024, but their cases appear to be ongoing. Number 6. James Enright. When 27-year-old outdoor enthusiast James Enright found himself wanting to devote more time to hunting and fishing, he moved from his hometown just outside the city of Vancouver, British Columbia, to the much more remote Vancouver Island. On Valentine's Day 2015, he met up with his friends Victoria, Tori Hurd, and Brandon Chiklis for an anti-Valentine's Day hangout session. Shortly before 1 o'clock in the morning, the trio arrived at the Edmonds SkyTrain station in Burnaby, where Chiklis planned to catch a train home. In a terrifying turn of events that was captured on camera, the friends arrived at the station as a fight broke out between 2 groups of men. Hurd began filming the ordeal on her cell phone from Enright's car. One particularly hostile man was seen acting out in a fit of rage with his shirt off while allegedly hurling racial slurs at his adversaries. When he saw Hurd recording, he approached the car and punched her in the face while yelling that he didn't care if she was a girl. At the same time, Tori could be heard screaming as the camera went blank. Meanwhile, surveillance cameras continued rolling as Enright tried intervening to protect Hurd. He exchanged a few punches with one of the suspects before suddenly falling backwards onto the floor. Enright had been stabbed, and he died from his injuries. Police arrested 18-year-old Taitusi Vikilani, who told investigators that he attacked Enright and his friends because they were filming the fight that was already going on. He denied hurting anyone and was released due to a lack of evidence. While reviewing surveillance footage, law enforcement gained a clearer understanding of the situation. They arrested Vikilani and another suspect, 22-year-old Jesse Selim, who admitted to stabbing Enright but claimed that he acted in self-defense. Selim was initially charged with murder but pleaded guilty to a reduced manslaughter charge and was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. Vikilani also pleaded guilty to manslaughter and received a 6-month jail sentence. Number 5. Jermaine Dixon. Former Patio Crew gang member Jermaine Dixon was released from federal prison in 2020 after serving nearly 2 decades on drug and murder charges. During his time behind bars, he had given up the gang lifestyle and he re-entered society as a new and changed man who was determined to stay on a better path. Less than a year later, however, the 47-year-old was shot in the back of the head in broad daylight while walking to his vehicle in Queens, New York. Surveillance footage showed an African-American man disguised in Orthodox Jewish attire rushing up behind Dixon and executing him in cold blood and in broad daylight. The suspect then sped off in a car. According to witnesses, the shooter lurked in the area for hours leading up to Dixon's murder while pretending to work on his car. The case remained unsolved for 3 years until finally, in 2023, police arrested 53-year-old Ron Reeder of Teaneck, New Jersey, on suspicion of murder. Detectives identified Reeder as the prime suspect after extensively reviewing surveillance footage and tracing the shooter's movements. Authorities believe the crime either stemmed from a bad deal in the narcotics trade or because the victim was known to carry large amounts of cash. On the day of his murder, Dixon had $10,000 in his possession, but the shooter fled the scene without taking the money. Reeder served 3 years in state prison during the late 1980s for robbery and weapons charges. A few years later, he received a 21-year sentence for manslaughter and weapons charges. He was paroled in 2012 and is currently being detained at Rikers Island on a first-degree murder charge. If convicted as charged, Reeder could face life in prison. Number 4. Elizabeth Liz Barazza. 29-year-old Elizabeth Liz Barazza and her husband Sergio were looking forward to celebrating their 5th wedding anniversary with a vacation to Florida in early 2019, just days ahead of their planned departure. Liz decided to host a yard sale in order to make some extra spending money for the trip. As Sergio left for work early one morning, Liz set up for the event outside the couple's Tomball, Texas home. In a horrifying act of violence that was captured on camera just moments after Sergio pulled out of the driveway and drove away, an unidentified individual who appeared to be wearing a disguise stealthily approached Liz. In the video, Liz could be heard greeting the person, followed by a conversation that lasted for just a few seconds before the mysterious figure pulled a revolver and shot her 3 times at point-blank range, causing her to collapse right there and then. As Liz lay dying on the ground, the gunman stood over her and fired one last shot before fleeing the scene. And because revolvers don't leave shell casings, no evidence of the actual bullets was left at the scene. The footage showed the killer driving away in a Nissan Frontier pickup truck, which could also be seen driving around the neighborhood before and after the murder. Police released the video to the public in hopes that someone would come forward with helpful information, but they have yet to identify the person in the footage. Naturally, both the police and the public have entertained the possibility that Sergio is somehow involved with his wife's murder, and he understands why. Speaking with local news station KHOU in early 2023, he acknowledged that it makes sense that some people might see him as a person of interest in the case, but he adamantly maintained his innocence, insisting he had nothing to do with the crime and that he would love to see the case solved. In January 2024, Liz's father, Bob Newell Jr., told ABC 13 that he believes his daughter was killed in a murder-for-hire plot, but he was at a loss to explain why he thinks Liz was targeted since she had no known enemies and lived a respectable lifestyle. Harris County detectives believe the shooting was planned but have not elaborated on whether they believe a hired hitman was responsible for the crime. The FBI and Texas Rangers are also working on the case. Sergio has never been charged in connection with the murder, but nobody has been ruled out and the murderer remains at large. Number 3. Stephanie Powell Anderson. Convenience store manager and mother of 3, Stephanie Powell Anderson, was shot dead as she entered her workplace in Raleigh, North Carolina, in April 2008. The 39-year-old was arriving early in the morning for the opening shift, just like any other day, when a masked thief ambushed her from behind and forced her into the store at gunpoint. Nearly the entire incident was captured by security cameras, including Anderson's anguished pleas to the gunman to spare her life. The suspect repeatedly ordered Anderson to open the store's safe, and she tried, but she was unable to do so. She could be heard saying, "Please, Jesus," and continuing to beg the robber not to kill her as she desperately scrambled to get the lock to open. Despite her pleas for mercy, the suspect shot Anderson. In the video, she could be heard screaming as she collapsed to the floor. She was in obvious agony, but the suspect continued demanding for her to open the safe, but Anderson was too injured to even try. After grabbing the keys and unsuccessfully trying to open the safe himself, the thief calmly exited the store as if it were any other ordinary day. In the meantime, Anderson died from her injuries. Her body was discovered in a pool of blood by her fiancé, Fred Russell Hewitt, who visited the store at the same time every morning to buy a newspaper and chat with Anderson. Heartbreaking surveillance footage showed Hewitt in a hysterical state as he tried making sense of the carnage around him and pleaded with 911 operators for emergency responders to hurry to the scene. Investigators tied the deadly crime to several recent similar robberies in the area, but they still didn't know who the culprit was. They eventually obtained a video with a clear view of his face and shared it with the public. A woman identified the suspect as her ex-boyfriend, Armand De Vega, a repeat offender with a history of burglaries. He was charged with murder and 8 counts of armed robbery in connection with the crime spree. De Vega was convicted of Stephanie's murder and 6 counts of robbery. He was sentenced to a life term without parole, followed by 57 to 72 years. Number 2. Mary Lou Sarkisian. 50-year-old mother of 3, Mary Lou Sarkisian of Huntington Beach, California, and her on and off boyfriend of 5 years, Jason Betcher, fought in vain to make their relationship work, but things only became more toxic with each argument, and in 2016, Sarkisian decided to break up with Betcher for good. By then, the relationship had taken a violent turn and she had become scared for her safety. She got a 5-year restraining order banning Betcher from going anywhere near her or contacting her, but it unfortunately failed to keep him away. Convinced that Sarkisian was holding out on some of the profits from his illegal marijuana growing operation, Betcher showed up at her house one day and allegedly tried to choke her out with a towel. The more Sarkisian made it clear that things between them were over, the more aggressive Betcher became in his attempts to force her back into a relationship. In her efforts to stay safe, Sarkisian blocked Betcher on her phone and installed security cameras at her residence. The very next day, her family became worried because they hadn't heard from her like usual. In the meantime, Betcher reached out to a relative and confessed to committing a horrific act, and at that family member's urging, he turned himself into the police. Meanwhile, Sarkisian was found dead in a pool of blood on the floor of her home. Based on the evidence at the scene, investigators determined that Betcher had tried to break in using a crowbar. When that didn't work, he waited outside Sarkisian's sliding glass bedroom door, knowing she would eventually let her dog outside. As soon as the opportunity presented itself, he slipped inside and violently beat and strangled Sarkisian. While reviewing the footage from Sarkisian's new system, detectives could hear Betcher sarcastically asking her how her new security system was working for her. He was charged with first-degree murder. During Betcher's trial, the court heard about how Sarkisian had, just as Betcher had suspected, somehow spent a lot more money than she made on paper in recent years. No one will ever know whether she stole it from Betcher's marijuana operation or if they had a financial agreement as business partners. Either way, nothing would have justified taking her life. Betcher's defense team argued that he didn't intend to kill Mary Lou and that he wouldn't have turned himself in if he had. All he meant to do that night was collect some money that Mary Lou owed him, but he lost control of his emotions. The defense also mentioned a few things from Betcher's childhood that they claimed had affected his behavior as an adult and urged the jury to convict the defendant to the lesser charge of second-degree murder or manslaughter. Prosecutors accused Betcher of lying in wait and deliberately killing Mary Lou in a premeditated fashion. The jury convicted him of first-degree murder with the special circumstance of lying in wait, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In case you missed it last year and are longing for some more true crime content, We have 19 crimes caught on camera, lined up for you right after number 1. Number 1. Scott Roberts. Scott Roberts was more than a little surprised when his brother, 66-year-old Jeffrey Roberts, showed up at his doorstep in North Ogden, Utah one day in April 2023. Jeffrey lived in Long Beach, California, and had traveled 700 miles to make the unannounced visit while Scott and his wife Jody were in the middle of eating dinner. Doorbell camera footage showed Scott opening the door to Jeffrey, who casually said, "What's up?" Understandably confused by his brother's impromptu visit, Scott replied, "What are you doing?" Jeffrey could be heard asking Scott if their mother was at the residence. In response, Scott clarified that their mother had been living in Missouri for a year. Then without warning, Jeffrey pulled a gun and opened fire, firing at least 8 bullets at Scott as he yelled to Jody to run. In the meantime, neighbors overheard the gunshots and dialed 911. At least one caller reported seeing a man and a van he didn't recognize in Scott and Jody's driveway. He further stated that he wasn't entirely sure if he heard gunshots, but that he wanted police to check out the scene just to be safe. The neighbor would soon learn that unfortunately his instincts proved correct. Scott died from his injuries while Jody was also shot but survived. Before exiting the residence, Jeffrey allegedly set fire to the home using road flares. He engaged in a shootout with responding officers and died in the exchange of gunfire. To this day, his motive for murdering his brother remains unclear. A family friend told ABC7 that family estrangement was a factor in the tragedy and that others pushed Jeffrey to the brink, but she unfortunately didn't go into further detail. At around 4:30 p.m. on April the 25th of 2023, 32-year-old William Garcia kidnapped a woman in the city of Commerce in southeast Los Angeles County, California. Security camera footage showed that the victim had been walking down the 2200 block of Coots Avenue when Garcia pulled up in a silver vehicle armed with a handgun. He grabbed her by the hair and forced her into the passenger seat after pistol whipping her in the head. At around 2 p.m. the next day, sheriff's deputies surrounded a home in the 5000 block of Kinsey Street, where Garcia was holed up. Authorities said that following his arrest, he would be charged with kidnapping and abduction. Less than 6 hours later, the victim was located in the area with no further injuries. According to officials, it was unclear whether or not the suspect had previously known the woman. Law enforcement reportedly seized Garcia's Kia Rio as evidence. Number 18. Nina Star Parisis. On September the 29th of 2021, Florida teen Nina Star Parisis was arrested and charged with robbery in Palm Springs. Surveillance footage showed the 19-year-old putting some items in her car at the Tire Kingdom on Military Trail. Parisis, dressed in dark clothing, was then seen approaching a woman and trying to grab her purse. After the victim resisted, Parisis threw her onto a bench and dragged her to the ground before yanking the purse off her shoulder. The thief then fled the scene in a silver SUV. The local fire rescue crew treated the victim for injuries to the arm and head. The following day, Palm Springs police found the SUV with Parisis in the passenger seat. She confessed to stealing a $5,000 Chanel purse, a gold chain, several credit cards, an iPhone, cash, and other items. She was held in custody at the Palm Beach County Jail. Number 17. Joe Cummings. In 2009, Joe Cummings noticed that someone had been stealing his food and urinating in the kitchen sink of his house in Manhattan, New York. He set up a surveillance camera and subsequently discovered that every time he went to sleep at night, a stranger would emerge from inside his cupboard. Grainy night vision footage showed a woman carefully stepping down from the upper area of the pantry onto a table and down to the floor. The suspect headed over to the sink and relieved herself before grabbing food and drinks from the fridge. She then sat down on the sofa, watched some television, and went back to the fridge. At that point, she heard Cummings exiting his bedroom and immediately hid back in the cupboard. After watching the footage, Cummings called the cops and the woman was arrested. Authorities believe that she'd been living in the cupboard for multiple weeks before she was discovered. Number 16. Sean Grubert. On September the 4th of 2014, South Carolina State Trooper Sean Grubert shot an unarmed man who reached for his license during a traffic stop at a Richland County gas station. Footage from 31-year-old Grubert's dash cam showed that as 35-year-old LeVar Jones stepped out of his truck, the trooper asked to see his driver's license. Jones turned and reached into his vehicle, at which point the officer shouted, "Get out of the car," drew his gun, and instantly fired a round. The victim was hit in the hip and was consequently hospitalized. In the aftermath, Grubert was relieved of his police duties. 20 days later, an arrest warrant was issued for Grubert on charges of assault and battery of a high and aggravated nature. He was taken into custody before posting his $75,000 bail. In March of 2016, he pleaded guilty and faced the possibility of spending up to 20 years in prison. More than a year later, he was handed a 12-year sentence, suspended for 5 years, plus 3 years of probation. Number 15. Brandon James Williams. On August 9th of 2017 in Stillwater, Oklahoma, 41-year-old Chastity Dawn Carey fatally shot a man she thought was attempting to skip bail. Carey, from Drumright, owned a bail bond company at 116 West 7th Avenue, and the man in question, 38-year-old Brandon James Williams, was her client. Her firm had reportedly put up $35,000 for Williams's bond. Surveillance footage revealed that the bondswoman had locked the door of her office moments before the shooting. Her son, 19-year-old Justin Henderson, was standing by with a pair of handcuffs. Carey ordered Williams to turn around and put his hands behind his back. An altercation ensued between the woman and her client, and when Williams tried to make his way toward a window, Carey grabbed a gun from her desk and shot him in the back. She then called 911 and reported the incident. When Stillwater authorities arrived at the scene, Williams was already dead. Carey was arrested, charged with first-degree murder, and denied bail while in custody. On March the 9th of 2018, however, she was acquitted of the murder charge. Her attorney indicated that if she had been charged with second-degree homicide instead, she likely would have been found guilty. Number 14. Mark Titley. Paramedic Mark Titley, aged 58, attempted to steal $75 from a patient's home in Shrewsbury, Shropshire, England, on June the 29th of 2022. Titley, from Ponsbury, was one of 4 medics from the West Midlands Ambulance Service who were called to the address on Torrin Drive after a 94-year-old collapsed in her garden. The woman was given CPR and advanced life support but died 20 minutes later. According to West Mercia Police, Titley was searching for a Do Not Resuscitate form inside the home when he came across a plastic box containing cash. Unbeknownst to him, he was being recorded by a security camera. Titley counted the money before securing it in his trouser pocket. After he spotted the camera, he immediately returned the cash and later claimed he'd intended to give it to the patient's family. The victim's son said he felt sick to his stomach after seeing the footage. On April the 3rd of 2023, Titley admitted theft at Shrewsbury Crown Court and was given an 18-week suspended jail sentence. He was also ordered to serve 120 hours of unpaid work and required to pay costs of no less than $664, as well as a $234 victim surcharge. According to the ambulance service Titley worked for, he was relieved of his post following the incident. Number 13. New York City subway passenger. A video posted in February of 2023 showed a black man hurling racially charged insults at a white couple on the New York City subway system. The man reportedly ordered the couple and their toddler to go back to Europe while addressing them as white monkeys. The video garnered nearly 500,000 views within a 2-month period. The unnamed suspect was described as a repeat offender who'd carried out similar verbal attacks in the past. His abusive pattern of behavior was unearthed by online sleuths who were outraged by the video. 3 individuals who were alleged to have been verbally assaulted by the same man shared posts about their experience, which took place around the city as well. Areas where the man had been spotted included 7th Avenue around 55th Street, a location outside Port Authority Bus Terminal, and 37th Street on 8th Avenue. At the time of the video's publication, it wasn't clear whether the unruly man had been charged with any crime. Number 12. Kenny Owen. On the night of July the 12th of 2022, a man attempted to break into more than a dozen homes in Cambridgeshire, England. The would-be burglar was said to have targeted at least 15 homes along the streets of Warrington in Peterborough. Several doorbell cameras showed him checking if the front doors to the residences were unlocked. Following the man's night of attempted burglaries, Cambridge police subsequently received reports of similar incidents and requested that more footage of the suspect be brought forward. They later identified the man as 44-year-old Kenny Owen and arrested him in Breton on July the 16th. On January the 16th of 2023, Owen pleaded guilty to 15 counts of attempted burglary and was sentenced to 38 months behind bars. Number 11. North Carolina car dealership. In the early hours of February the 25th of 2023, a group of 4 broke into Adams Auto Group in Charlotte, North Carolina, and stole 4 luxury cars, 3 BMWs, and a Maserati. The stolen vehicles had a total value amounting to more than $300,000. The suspects had reportedly driven to the scene on East Independence Boulevard in a blue car. Surveillance footage revealed that the burglars broke into the dealership through the front door, then grabbed 4 sets of key fobs from the back corner. According to law enforcement, the suspects had used cinder blocks to break the glass. One of them was seen driving off through the front window with the $55,000 Maserati Ghibli S Grand Sport. The other 3 swiftly followed, taking 760i, 840i, and 850i BMWs with them. According to the case's lead detective, Calvin Helms, 2 of the 4 cars that were stolen from the showroom were quickly tracked down. He added that one was abandoned in Greensboro, while another was found on Interstate 277. Authorities speculated that an organized crime ring could have been responsible for the burglary. 3 weeks prior, 4 other cars had also been stolen from Adams and an additional 12 cars from 2 other dealerships. Number 10. Dakota Daniels. 27-year-old Dakota Daniels from Santa Rosa Valley, California, was arrested for attempting to steal a car in Agora Hills on March the 31st of 2023. According to eyewitnesses, Daniels initially tried to swipe a purse from a 75-year-old woman who'd been sitting in a vehicle parked in front of Ralph's grocery store. The victim was pulled out of the car and thrown to the ground after the struggle for the handbag. Daniels then entered the vehicle and tried to drive away, but the victim had an anti-theft club installed on the vehicle's steering wheel, which made it difficult to maneuver. Camera footage showed the car pinballing around the parking lot in the Twin Oaks shopping center on Canaan Road as Daniels tried to flee. She collided with several vehicles before eventually 3 people were able to restrain her. Her hands were tied with a bandana and her shoes were tied together until deputies from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department arrived. The suspect was subsequently arrested on suspicion of carjacking and assault. Number 9. Deshaun Thomas. A homeless man was shot on the sidewalk in front of the Globe building in St. Louis, Missouri, on February the 27th of 2023. In footage recorded by a witness, 23-year-old Deshaun Thomas was seen standing over the victim, David Saldana, who had his hands over his ears. He then loaded a pistol and fatally shot Saldana in the head before fleeing the scene. According to law enforcement, Thomas was arrested while in possession of a firearm and bullet casings. The following day, a local newspaper reported that the shooter had been charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action and was scheduled to appear at the Carnahan courthouse. Eyewitnesses reported that prior to the shooting, Thomas and Saldana got into a fight outside a nearby gas station in the 700 block of North Tucker Boulevard. At the time, it was unclear if the pair knew each other. Number 8. Michael Anthony Harris. On August the 18th of 2020, 44-year-old Michael Anthony Harris shot a woman twice in the back in Daytona Beach, Florida. The victim called 911 around 3:38 and was found by the stairway at the Travelers Inn located at 850 South Ridgewood Avenue, but the suspects had already fled. Law enforcement received an anonymous tip on August the 29th that Harris was in Unit 104 of an apartment complex in Espanola Avenue in Holly Hill. Police from both Daytona Beach and Holly Hill were dispatched to the apartment that afternoon. When officers entered the building, they were immediately shot at and subsequently returned fire. Body camera footage captured the ensuing shootout between law enforcement and Harris. Gunfire ceased after officers heard the screams of a woman coming from the same room in which the shooter was barricaded. The woman was fortunately brought to safety unscathed. When the firing continued, Harris was eventually shot dead by police. The police chief said in a press conference that the incident exemplified one of the reasons why his department had invested in body cameras almost a decade earlier, as the footage confirmed that Harris had fired the first shot. Number 7. Thomas Robinson. A 23-year-old murder suspect named Thomas Robinson lunged for a police officer's gun while being taken into custody in Cincinnati, Ohio. On June the 21st of 2016, Robinson was responsible for the shooting of teenager Joseph Reno Armstrong and another man in Westwood 5 days earlier. Camera footage showed that the suspect had been handcuffed to a chair in the interrogation room. After he learned that he was going to be charged with murder, he reached for an officer's gun. During the ensuing struggle, he repeatedly shouted, "Kill me! Kill me!" Robinson was ultimately tased by another officer and subdued immediately. On October the 21st of 2019, he pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter, robbery, and felonious assault and was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Number 6. Andres Trujillo and Yoniel de Vera Gutierrez. Farm owner Ed Harvey Davis of 805 Braddock Road in Auburndale, Florida, reported many of the Hereford cattle from his pasture missing. On December the 12th of 2011, the Polk County Sheriff's Office sent out a Crime Stoppers alert that sought information from the public regarding the animal's disappearance. A week later, a reserve sergeant notified agricultural deputies of a red light camera infraction that occurred shortly before 3 a.m. on Highway 27 and Holly Hill Road in Haines City. A white 1989 Dodge pickup truck towing a gooseneck livestock trailer was spotted on the red light camera. The truck's license plate reportedly belonged to a man named Andres Trujillo. It was determined that Trujillo's trailer had been transporting cattle with Hereford breed colors and characteristics. The man was headed in the direction of the cattle markets in the south. The Pasco County Sheriff's Office was also looking into a livestock theft at the same time and had a detailed description of the suspect vehicle and trailer. After speaking with Pasco County officials, Polk County investigators discovered that Yoniel de Vera Gutierrez of 388 East 55th Street in Hialeah had sold livestock that had been stolen. Footage revealed that 7 cows were sold at the livestock market auction on December the 12th for a total of $3,798.21. After seeing the cows' sale on video, the Polk County case's victim, Ed Harvey Davis, was able to positively identify them as his livestock. Additionally, a security camera at a bank captured both de Vera Gutierrez and Trujillo cashing a check after the sale of the cows. Charges brought against the suspects included grand theft of livestock and dealing in stolen property. Number 5. Christopher Locke. A woman was robbed at a 7-Eleven located on 501 East LaSalle Avenue in South Bend, Indiana, on May the 18th of 2020. Surveillance video from the store showed a male suspect grabbing Justina Cruz while she was paying for a beverage. The two proceeded to wrestle back and forth before the man took her wallet and fled the scene. The video footage was posted online, helping authorities identify the suspect as 46-year-old Christopher Locke. 2 days after the robbery, Locke was arrested and held in custody at the St. Joseph County Jail, according to a press release from the prosecutor's office. He admitted to the crime and was charged with robbery resulting in bodily injury. His bond was set at $10,000. According to official documents, Locke had been charged with burglary and resisting law enforcement in connection with past incidents. On March the 4th of 2021, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 9 years in prison to be served concurrently with the punishments from 2 previous convictions from 2019. Number 4. Fayetteville mugging. On the night of July the 24th of 2019, a man who just returned to his home in Fayetteville, North Carolina, was approached by 4 armed and masked men. The suspects forced him to the ground and stole his cash, cell phone, and credit cards. Footage from a nearby doorbell camera showed the victim, who had blood on his face, being forced to unlock the door to his house. One of the burglars said, "Open this door or we're going to kill you," while a gun was held to the victim's back. The injured man's fiancée opened the door after she heard the commotion. The robbers took cash, phones, debit cards, and marijuana from inside the house and smashed the doorbell camera before fleeing the scene. The police said that the robbery wasn't random, but as of the latest developments, the suspects had yet to be identified. Number 3. Hooded West Midlands burglars. In West Midlands, England, a domestic burglary was captured by CCTV at around 8:40 p.m. on June the 16th of 2019. 2 hooded men avoided a security camera at the front of the house by entering the property through the back of the Netherton home. Unbeknownst to them, however, another camera was stationed near the back and captured them in clear view. Footage showed the pair passing through a kitchen window before forcing their way inside with crowbars. They fled within half an hour of entering the property, having stolen a gold ring, cash, and a passport. As of the most recent updates, West Midlands Police had publicly released the footage and was still investigating the matter. Number 2. Suffolk thieves. On November the 16th of 2023, masked women stole beauty supplies worth more than $11,000 from a store at the Hampton Roads Crossing Shopping Center in Suffolk, Virginia, at around 3 p.m. Security cameras at Ulta Beauty in the 1000 block of University Boulevard caught the suspects during the commission of the theft. The footage showed that as one of them walked around grabbing items, the other two concealed items inside their clothes. The 3 women left the store without paying. Local police sought the public's help in identifying the suspects, according to 13 News Now. Number 1. Nasli Ortiz and Benjamin Green. A road rage incident unfolded on July the 26th of 2022 when Nasli Ortiz and Benjamin Green tailed a motorist until they came to a stop off an exit on Interstate 45 in Houston, Texas. 34-year-old Green exited his black truck near Parramatta Lane, approached the other driver and assaulted him. According to the county sheriff, 40-year-old Ortiz got out of the truck and fired a gun at the victim's vehicle as he attempted to flee the scene. One shot penetrated the back seat while a second bullet hit a car dealership nearby. A witness recorded footage of the suspects fleeing in their truck after the shots were fired. Authorities later found out that the victim was with his young nephew. He told ABC 13 that the toddler was hit by shattered glass but wasn't seriously injured. The victim added that he'd been taken to the hospital after the bullet grazed the side of his head. Ortiz was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Her bond was set at $300,000. Green was charged with assault for the alleged attack, and his bond was set at $150,000. The pair were held in custody at the Harris County Jail as they awaited the next steps of their case's legal proceedings. Thanks for watching. Would you rather never be allowed to take a picture with your mobile phone again, or never be allowed to send a text with it again? Let us know in the comment section below.